Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.
So many of us have been in that situation where you're just ignoring the problem, you hope it goes away, you know it's there, and you just don't want to open the mail, you don't want to answer the text message, whatever it might be. And so, what I try to do in a mediation, I'm kind of an outgoing guy, so I try to, make the mood a little bit lighter. And folks have entered into our mediations and said, wow, you all are having a lot of fun here. And you really wouldn't expect that to be happening during you really wouldn't. And I think really when you make it a more open process where folks feel like we're building something together, and at the end of the day, it's voluntary, so if you don't want to agree to anything, you don't have to. I really think we get to better results.
Many renters are fed up these days, and don't get us started on how the landlords feel. That was a hot topic today on St. Louis on the Air. And before we move on, I want to remind you that the biggest source of St. Louis Public Radio's funding comes from listeners like you. Because you value what you hear on St. Louis on the Air, donate today. Go to stlpr.org/donate. That's stlpr.org/donate. I'm Sarah Fensky. This is St. Louis on the Air. The economic disruption caused by the coronavirus pandemic has hit renters hard. Some simply can't pay the rent, yet the moratoriums in place mean their landlord can't evict them either. Can these relationships be saved? Well, Elad Gross thinks so. He's the outreach coordinator for the St. Louis Mediation Project. It provides much-needed resources to both tenants and landlords in St. Louis County who find themselves in a bind this year. One woman who's taken advantage of the service is KaDrea Harrison. She was renting an apartment in St. Louis County when the pandemic began, and that's when her trouble started.
Basically, I wasn't working, and it caused me to get behind on my rent.
KaDrea's leasing office said she might qualify for help with her rent. They also told her about the St. Louis Mediation Project.
She was like, yeah, they have like CARES Act for people who were affected from the COVID situation. And she said that I should be able to qualify. And if we do the mediation program, just to set up like an arrangement. And then I also got information for other resources and everything like that.
KaDrea Harrison said that the mediation and funding assistance is still in process, but she said it's already proved helpful.
So far at this moment, I haven't received any assistance at this time, but it has been helpful. I also received resources for, I believe it was called the Prosperity Connection. Just a little financial literacy education. And then, they actually are really nice people that they kind of connected me to just to give me more information of future financial decisions that I'll be making in the future, like buying a house and getting a new car, stuff like that.
And KaDrea Harrison told us she's feeling significantly more hopeful now.
I'm definitely working now, so it's definitely with the Prosperity Connection and speaking with the mediation. They basically kind of just gave me a definitely different outlook on what my situation is, and basically it's not over. And I have help, and because of the arrangements, it's not like all hope is lost.
And we asked KaDrea Harrison if she had any advice for other tenants who are struggling. And here is what she suggested.
Definitely communicate with the person that you're leasing to, or if it's mortgage, getting your mortgage from. Everybody knows that the situation is going on. Most places will work with you as far as just making sure that you're, not going without. I mean, definitely stay hopeful and reach out to the resources that are given to you, and just be persistent. Just don't give up. I was nervous at first doing the mediation program because I'm like, oh no, I don't want everyone to know what's going on. But after speaking with them, it was like, talking to regular people, just letting them know what's going on and getting help.
And that is KaDrea Harrison. Now, the St. Louis Mediation Project is a partnership between Washington University School of Law, St. Louis County, United States Arbitration and Mediation, Beyond Housing, and other organizations also dealing with the eviction crisis. And joining us today to talk about it is Elad Gross. Elad, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So just a few months ago, you were on the ballot in the Democratic primary running for state attorney general. When did you switch gears to this?
2 days later.
Pretty quick.
Literally 2 days later. Yeah, I got a phone call from Professor Karen Tokars at WashU, wonderful person who's been leading this project and the clinic at WashU for quite some time. And she said, I know I probably shouldn't be calling you so soon, but I really need help. And I said, with what? And she said, with these eviction problems that are happening in the county. And so she described the project to me, and it was something that I've been very passionate about for quite some time, and I talked a lot about as a candidate, so I was on board immediately and have been working there ever since.
That was perfect timing. Sounds like maybe you were looking for a project, and boy, did she drop a big one in your lap. Tell me this. I understand this project predates that phone call.
Yes.
How did this project first get started?
Oh, goodness. So the St. Louis Mediation Project has been around for over a decade now. And then U.S. A&M, United States Arbitration and Mediation, got involved a few years later, in about 2012 or so. But this has been a very important program in the St. Louis area to make sure that we're doing a better job in landlord and tenant housing court, especially because I don't know if you've ever been to one, but those things get packed very quickly. Folks don't have much representation. It's kind of in and out, and folks don't know what their rights are. And the mediation program itself really saves so much time. It gets you better outcomes. And just like, I didn't know what KaDrea was going to say, like I had her, but just listening to that, I got really emotional because I'm just seeing how successful this program is with folks. And that's the kind of results that we're getting. They're much better results than the packed courts that we're seeing right now.
Well, it's interesting. I know you work with both tenants and landlords, and in some ways it feels like those two groups' interests are at odds in this current financial crisis. Landlords need their payment, or at least they want their payment. There's tenants who just can't make rent. How do you sort of deal with these two ideas that don't seem like they could ever be on the same page?
Right. You would think that, but especially during the current crisis, we're all in trouble. And I think your other guests today have indicated just how important it is for us to see all of ourselves together in this. And I think in this current situation, and even before this, sometimes you've got some opposing views, right? Somebody wants their money, somebody doesn't have their money, and whatever it might be. And that's really where mediation serves such an important role. You get folks together. Since you put this out there, I've been getting some text about this, trying to arrange some other ones and some other emails and everything. And I think folks want to see better outcomes. Folks want to be able to pay. Folks want to be able to keep tenants in their housing. They don't want to go through the rush of finding another tenant and having to, all of the costs that are associated with going to court and everything else. There are better outcomes out there, and mediation is really a way for folks even to avoid a lot of the court fees, because now we're doing mediations like with KaDrea, for example, before those cases even go to court, and just reaching out into the community and trying to set these up ahead of time. Sure, you sometimes get, especially at the beginning of some of these, especially when you're doing them in court, sometimes folks are just at each other, and I've had a few of those. But after a few moments, I think we realize, if we actually do talk this out and figure out a way to work together through mediation, the outcomes are going to be better for all of us.
Well, as you mentioned, after we put this on our social media, you're starting to get calls. We're starting to get calls. I already have somebody on the phone who wants to talk to you, which I think is great. And we do want to encourage you, if you're listening to this and you have a question for Elad about how all this works, or simply trying to just understand what the law even says about the situation you're in, he's here to help. You can can call us at 314-382-8255. That's 382-TALK. You can also send us a tweet at STL on air, or you can email us at talk@stlpublicradio.org. So let's go to the phone lines. Bill is calling from St. Louis. Bill, hi, you're on St. Louis on the air.
Been advocating for some time for more freeze on help for tenants behind on their rent because of COVID employment problems. But a friend of mine posted on Facebook when I did that, the wonderful Pete Rothschild, that landlords were having issues also because of this. Mm-hmm. And I haven't read of any similar interventions for landlords with their banks, and we don't want our small businesses or even large businesses to have financial difficulties either. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering if the wonderful Elad, whose campaign I thought was great, had any wisdom on what assistance is being given to landlords.
Bill, I think that's a great question. Elad, tell me there's something, because, I really worry about people who have to pay a bank and yet aren't getting any rent.
Right. And so what we did get through the CARES Act, we did get a first round of funding that we were able to help a lot of tenants and landlords access together that covered rent, covered even utilities for folks who were affected by the COVID-19 crisis, whether that was a loss of job, whether that was a cut in hours or childcare, whatever it was. If they went into quarantine, we had a few of those folks as well who got sick, and that rent would be covered. Starting in the March right around there, because that's when the crisis started, through whenever they were having problems. And there were wonderful organizations that are still trying to give away some of that funding. A lot of that funding has been used. As you can imagine, there was a very big demand for that. But that money would go directly to landlords. So while a tenant would apply for it, it would go directly to the landlord. So in some ways, it was really a program where you needed to have a partnership between tenants and landlords, and that was something that we were able to facilitate a lot. For anybody who's listening out there who is a policymaker, we really need funding. We need funding for programs like this, but we really need funding for folks like KaDrea and so many other tenants who are out there and landlords who are out there right now. And so I really do stress the need for additional CARES Act funding, if we can find it, and hopefully a second round of this, because there are so many folks who are in that boat who were not able to get that funding in the first round of it, and hoping that there's some still out there, but goodness gracious, the need is very big.
That's a good point. I mean, the best way maybe to help a landlord is to make sure the tenant can pay the rent.
Right.
Their
exactly
interests
right.
are more aligned than maybe we want to think of it as. I want to go back to the phone lines. Mark is calling from St. Louis. Mark, hi, you're on St. Louis on the air.
Hey, how are you?
Thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm actually one of the volunteer mediators here in St. Louis County. And I'm a real estate attorney, and I was asked to join the program, and I've been doing it for a couple years, and I found it to be incredibly successful.
And what do you think is the key to that success there, Mark?
I think the key to it is allowing the landlords an opportunity to talk to the tenants, whereas many of them have probably felt that the tenants, because they're not able to pay, have not been communicating with the landlord. And the landlord's at their wit's end, which is why they filed the lawsuit in order to evict them. And this is an opportunity prior to going into the judge. And, many landlords don't want to evict a tenant if they can find a way to pay or catch up in some way. And this is an opportunity for them to sit down, to lower the emotional temperatures with an independent third party who's neutral, who's just trying to facilitate conversation, and allows each side to say, tell me what's going on, what happened, how did we get here, and I find 9 times out of 10 that the landlord doesn't want to evict, and the tenant doesn't really want to leave. And if they do, we can make a deal and figure out what that looks like and a schedule for leaving. But if they don't really want to go, we can usually find a way to work it out.
Boy, that is so heartening to hear. And it makes me think of what KaDrea said in the introduction to this conversation here, where she said at first she was just kind of embarrassed. She didn't really even want to admit what was going on. Elad, is that something you see, that if people are able to just come to the table and start talking, that's much better than when we're sort of hiding out, embarrassed that we didn't make the rent?
Oh, my goodness. It's so important because So many of us have been in that situation where you're just ignoring the problem. You hope it goes away. You know it's there, and you just don't want to open the mail. You don't want to answer the text message, whatever it might be. And that is so true for so many people. And so, what I try to do in a mediation, I'm kind of an outgoing guy, so I try to, make the mood a little bit lighter. And folks have entered into our mediations and said, wow, you all are having a lot of fun here. And you really wouldn't expect that to be happening during you really wouldn't.
You would not.
but I think, we've got it's not just attorneys who do this. Linda, who's been wonderful, she worked for Beyond Housing, a wonderful organization in the St. Louis area. We've had folks who've done a lot of work with the Equal Housing and Opportunity Council for the St. Louis area, and folks who have done a lot of housing work with people. So we're able to get them to counseling, to really good advice. Prosperity Connection is another great organization we've been able to refer folks to. And I think really when you make it a more open process where folks feel like we're building something together, and at the end of the day, it's voluntary. So if you don't want to agree to anything, you don't have to. I really think we get to better results. And Mark is right. We have so many wonderful folks who volunteer their time to do these mediations. And it's a really great program that's doing wonderful work for folks right now.
Yeah, Mark, I want to thank you for sharing that experience, and also thank you for the work you're doing. That's amazing to hear attorneys volunteering their time. We also got a voicemail yesterday from our listener, Shannon Keating. She lives in Bridgeton, and she explained in this voicemail she had been renting a house and she had a roommate, and she explained what happened next.
It's interesting that you're bringing this topic up because I recently resolved a dispute with my landlord regarding the lease termination. Shortly after moving into the house, I realized that the situation with my roommate was not going to work out, and wanted to terminate the lease. There is a clause in the lease that says for a fee of $2,000, the lease can be terminated early. When I presented this to the landlord, she was not willing to work with me and suggested that if my roommate didn't also want to terminate the lease, then she would not be able to do anything. It took reaching out to several legal advocacy groups on my behalf to solve the dispute. And just over the weekend, I was able to come to an agreement with the landlord and my former roommate.
And that is Shannon. We were happy to hear there was a good resolution on that. But Elad, for the services that you offer, is this something where if there's a third party involved, there's a roommate there, this starts to get really complicated? You're playing three-dimensional chess. Are you guys willing to deal with things like that in these mediations?
Good. We deal with just about everything. So, that happens. And, all the mediations we do are confidential. And I explained this at the very beginning about how it's all voluntary, it's confidential. And the reason for that is I want folks to be honest so that we can have everything out on the table. We can talk about it in an honest way. And we're not hiding anything. Like, we're not hiding the fact that this is happening with the roommate, or that this is a provision in the contract. And that way we're all open with each other. Now, at the end of the day, if they don't agree and they want to keep that stuff confidential, done. That's what the deal is. But we've dealt with all kinds of situations. And I will say this, as mediators, we're not there to provide legal representation for either side. Mm-hmm. We don't represent the landlord. We don't represent the tenant. Now, there are some situations they come to us and they don't need a mediation. They need a lawyer. And there are some wonderful organizations out there that we can refer folks to if they need that help. We don't provide that kind of representation. We really do try to come to an amicable agreement between the parties if we can. And if mediation doesn't work out, then there are other avenues for folks to explore. But having that first, or having that once it does go to court, really does. The numbers have shown over the last few years when they've studied this, but have really led to more successful agreements and outcomes, less evictions, less problems in communities as a result, less cost to communities as a result. This is a very big win for the community as a whole, and one that really is needed in the St. Louis region.
So Elad, I just have one quick question. We're very short on time here, but I know you guys only work with St. Louis County. Is there a similar organization we could refer city dwellers to? Yeah,
if you give us, our numbers out there, if you contact us, we'll be able to get you referred to the right folks. Like I mentioned, the Equal Housing and Opportunity Council, great organization that they're doing a lot of work there too. So that's who I refer a lot of folks to over there. But the WashU's Civil Rights and Mediation Clinic, that's a big part of this. We're trying to help everybody in the region too. So if you do call me and we can't do something about it, we'll get you to the right people for sure.
Okay, well, that's a great assurance there. And Elad Gross, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, saluting Earth Day on April 22nd with an ongoing commitment to help offset carbon emissions with sustainable harvesting of Missouri forests. Details at choosewood.com.